number 1 of 2022 fall camp. We'll open it up on the floor, front row middle. Dave Biddle, 24/7 Sports.
Hi, Ryan. Other than improving your short yardage running game, what's the main point of emphasis offensively for you guys during camp?
For the whole team, it's preseason is toughness, discipline, and skill. Those are the 3 areas we really want to just focus on. Overall toughness in preseason, and the reason we say that is because we have to keep each other, upright. We got to take care of each other. We got to work with each other, but at the same time, we got to build that callus and that edge. So that's the first thing. Discipline of just playing the game, penalties, discipline of your position, coming out every day, working hard, taking care of your body, and then skill. The skill of your position, the skill of playing the game. So those are really the 3 areas that we're kind of focused on across the board. Offensively, it's just the balance. It's the balance of the run game and throwing the football.
The offense has been so successful since you've been here. I'm curious, how often do you have to mix up your concepts going into each season? Things that have not been on film that your opponents have not been able to study.
Yeah, what you do is you look at your personnel and you say, okay, how do we best use our personnel? And each year it changes. And I think this year we have a new challenge ahead of us just with the different guys that we have. And so that's kind of the art of college coaching is, you try to figure out who your guys are and then try to, put enough balance together where they can't take away one thing and then you don't have an answer, but to really showcase the guys that, their skill set and do and run the plays that fit their skill set the best. When you think about really since 17, there's been a lot of similarity, but there's been a lot of difference too between JT and Dwayne and Justin and then now with CJ. So it always starts with the quarterback, the line, and then it goes from there. Mm-hmm.
Third row middle, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
Ryan, it looks like Jake Seibert's out at cornerback now. What went into that decision?
He had played some wide receiver and corner in high school, and he wanted to kind of bring some different value. So he's still going to work on kicking and do that part of it, but he's also going to be able to help at some of the other positions.
Is Noah the only kicker right now? It didn't look like Parker was out there.
No, those guys will still be around. I think it was just an illness today.
Third row right, Dylan from Lettermen Row.
You talked about competitive stamina in Indianapolis
Yeah.
last week. Is there a way to build that in camp? Can you build competitive stamina in camp, or is that just something you have to wait and see when it comes, if you have it or not?
A little bit of both. I think it's something we got to hammer all year long. There's no way to really build that in terms of the length of the season. But I think we can talk about it in the second half of practice, the middle of camp, the end of camp, when the newness is worn off. It certainly was up on the slide last night. It's something we're hitting. But today, everyone was jacked up today and flying around. And, so that's going to be coming up real soon, though, is that the middle of practice and the end of practice. You got to really play some of your best football. And then as we get into camp, too, the same thing, that third, fourth day in a row of pads when, it gets hard, where are you? And that'll be part of it.
Second row right, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
I think we're always trying to pick when we see guys moving around. The whole defensive line group was working out together when we got out there, except for Caden Curry. Is there any kind of cross training that goes on with him at other positions right now, or is that just nothing?
That was nothing. Yeah. I'm not sure what that was.
So I thought I was
Yeah, no.
How are you kind of assessing defensive progress during preseason camp? What is that in your mind?
Well, I think once we get the pads on, we'll get a better feel for that. But certainly the understanding of the defense, where guys are at, and how quickly they're fitting things the right way, how fast they're reacting, are they where they're supposed to be? And you can tell by their confidence too, and when you're anticipating as opposed to reacting. I think that's important. But the technique and fundamentals are still critically important, and that's our base foundation for everything. If we don't have that, it doesn't work. So these days in helmets, it's good to see, and organizationally, and guys flying around and giving good effort. But we'll get a better idea once the pads are on and we're able to block and we start getting to tackle and scrimmaging.
I know you might not, as you're saying, might not be at this level yet, but I'm curious about just the balance between, on the offensive side, you're obviously trying to develop there and execute things there, but also sort of pressure testing the defense probably. How does that balance work for you?
Yeah. There's going to be times where, we need to work with each other and maybe give the defense something they need. They give the offense something they need. And then, there's times where the offense and defense will go against each other. And it isn't really so much schematically trying to match wits, and because Jim does a great job with that. And I think over the years we've done a decent job there as well. It's more about the fundamentals of just lining up and who's got better pad level, who's got better finish, who's tougher. And I think that's, to me, where the competitiveness happens, and that's where you learn, because I think, scheme is very important, but effort and pad level and toughness and those type of things are more important.
Front row right, Austin Ward, rivals, dotting the I's.
And 97.1 The Fan. Ryan, was there a particular position unit that you were most curious to see today?
No. I mean, it's just, when we go out there in the summer and we're running and doing different things this year, we're able to do a little bit more. It's fun, get to see the guys work out, and you have high hopes for everybody, in the offseason. Everyone has a really good offseason, I thought, I really do think we had a great offseason, but it's just good to get out there and see, some of the younger guys, see how some of the guys who've been here 2 and 3 years, where are they at after a really strong offseason, their bodies, the way they're moving around. That was more of that than it was one position, probably.
G looked like maybe he's getting closer to what you want physically at tight end. What have you seen from maybe that summer and how he looks getting into camp now?
Yeah, well, I think the tight end group as a whole had a really good summer. Cade Stover had an unbelievable summer. He was an Iron Buckeye, and Mitch Rossi had a really good summer. And then you have Joe, G, Sam, Bennett. I mean, I think that has a chance to have some good depth right there. But they got to build, they got to grow. There's not a ton of experience in that group, so Coach Wilson in that room, it'll be a really important 3 weeks here.
Fourth row left, Jacob Bench, the Lantern.
Yeah, hey Ryan, I just wanted to ask about CJ Hicks, since he is coming into the program this year. How has his summer gone, and just what were your impressions of him from maybe today?
Yeah, no, when you're a freshman and you come in the summer, 5-10 years ago, a lot different than when you come in January like he did. Had a full spring under his belt, whole summer. Now, when you look at him, he almost looks like he's one of the guys that's been around for a while. So that's good. But that's a guy, for example, that is going to be fun to watch him now go play. You don't think of him as a freshman anymore. At least we don't. So once we start getting into the preseason camp, hopefully he's taking the next step.
And then on the other side of the ball with the running backs, I noticed Mayan and Evan were kind of going back and forth with the reps. How do you plan on maybe splitting the carries between them now that you have had one practice to kind of see where they are? Yeah,
well, we'll split those carries up, and there'll be plenty of reps to go around. We've got a bunch of guys, a bunch of reps, and that's what the focus is. I told those guys, let your reps speak for you. Don't start worrying about, where you are in terms of the depth chart. What reps am I getting? You're going to get plenty of reps in the preseason. Make sure you make them count. And then what we'll do is like we always do. Is this person game ready? Can this guy help us beat Notre Dame? If he can, then let's let him go play. And then there's just the journey of the season, and that's important to have depth at all positions. But, we're going to split those reps up and give those guys the opportunity to compete.
Third row left, Bill Landis, rivals, dot in the I.
Ryan, it looked like when Justin broke the offensive line and the tackles and inside guys, all of your true freshmen were with the tackles. And I don't know, do you view Avery, Integra, and Carson as tackles positionally, or was that more just helping bolster the numbers on that side? Because if you took those 3 away, I think there would have been 4 other tackles there.
I think Justin wanted to start him there and then can move them all inside, because all of them could play inside, but he wants to start them out at tackle and get their feet moving that way, and then kind of build them and see where that goes. And again, you won't know until you really get the pads on and what that looks like day in and day out, but I think he wants to start them there.
And then with Kyle McCord, there's obviously no expectation that he's going to challenge for the job. You have your starting quarterback. So what's a camp look like for a guy who's sort of firmly entrenched as the number 2? Do you still try to give him work with the ones? Is he strictly with the 2s? How do you kind of go throughout all this with a guy like that?
Well, I think the first thing is you got to get CJ game ready. That's the first priority. And then you try to get the other guys as many reps as possible and try to get them in there. And Kyle had a really good offseason, so that was great. And Devin's worked really hard as well, and he's only been here. It's another guy who's only been here since January. But you got to develop these guys. It's a huge 3 weeks to bring those guys along. And they're going to get plenty of reps. They'll get reps with the 1s. They'll get reps with the 2s. We'll mix those up, and that's part of the process. And so, how many guys can we get game ready? That's the goal. But certainly we got to get CJ to the point where he's ready to go play his best football against Notre Dame.
Over here to the right, Clay Hall, WSYX.
Ryan, do you agree with this notion that if the offense stays constant and the defense gives you incremental, they get better, then you'll get where you want to get?
I mean, our offense hasn't done anything. I mean, this is a whole new group, so we got to go out and prove ourselves. It's just, and I know what you're saying. I think this offense is going to go out there and start scoring and be the best offense, in the conference. Well, it doesn't just happen, and we have to make sure we're starting with our foundation, and that's running the football and toughness and having our edge and ball security and all the little things that lead you there, and then it goes from there. But I will say, if we can play complementary football this year, then that gives us a chance to win, in the first game. And that's all we're going to really focus on right now. It's very, very easy to start getting ahead of ourselves. But in order to reach our goals, we got to take care of business early on. And really, you can't start accomplishing those goals until November. So we got to focus on just getting better every day. And boy, that's cliche. I get it. But you have to. And there's a reason why it's cliche, because you have to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think our defense has more experience coming to this year. I really like what we're doing schematically. So, the expectation, I think, someone said, well, why would you say it has to be a top 10 defense? I'm not saying it has to be. I'm just saying that's the expectation. It's the expectation on offense is Ohio State. We should be a top 10 special teams. We want to be, the best in the country at what we do. Then we should be held accountable to that. And that's the goal. And that's what we're working to make sure happens. And if we do have a top 10 offense, top 10 defense, top 10 special teams, that'll give us a chance to reach our goals.
Has Jim outlined, what's the first thing he's got to accomplish, or where they are in where he feels they are in terms of reaching their potential? Or
I know that a lot of the feedback in talking to him and the entire staff is just how impressed he's been with the approach for the guys in that room. Getting a lot of extra work, being able to handle some of the schematics and some of the checks and different things that go on over there. So there's been a lot of good feedback there. But at the end of the day, we got to stop the run. We got to stop the run, and that's going to start with defeating blocks and knocking back the line of scrimmage with pad level.
Right behind him, Adam King, WBNS 10 TV.
I know you say you're taking it day by day, and there's always an expectation of championships here, but do you guys feel it a little more in certain years? Like, do you know, hey, this is our year with CJ coming back and with this offense to try and go win it all, really?
I mean, you hope that every year you're in that position at Ohio State. I think that's what makes Ohio State unique. There's probably 5 to 10 across the country that are that way, where every year the expectation stays the same. That being said, every year is different. The people are different, and you hope you have enough coming back that gives you a chance to make that run. Whether it's a young quarterback and a veteran defense, or a veteran offensive line, or a veteran quarterback and a younger area, whatever. The good news is a lot of our younger guys have gotten experience, so that's exciting. But you can't start getting too far down the road with that stuff. It just doesn't work. You got to keep grinding every day and stay hungry.
Can you learn from the first practice, or even the next couple weeks of camp, as opposed to that first game against Notre Dame?
Yeah, I think after next Saturday, we'll have a good feel of what progress we've made since the spring. Yeah, and it'll give us a pretty good idea going into week. Really, it'll be kind of that this is, we have 3 practices. We're taking Sunday off, then we roll next week. And then we have that next week, and then we're kind of getting into the Notre Dame. So, yeah, we have to get a pretty good idea what kind of team we have by the end of next Saturday.
Front row middle, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Building a little bit off of that, I would guess that every year a coach has a gut feel about what kind of team he's going to have. Last year you didn't share this with us, but I know you had some misgivings about how the defense. COVID year was a COVID year. Do you have a gut feel about this team? It seems to have all the ingredients. Do you feel different about this team?
Yeah, it's a different team, absolutely. Yeah, we sat here last year. I was concerned. We came off of COVID, like you said, and so we didn't really have some of those games where we were able to get some of the young guys reps in that 2020 year. You think about 5 regular season games, and then we played the CFP, and then we were in the national championship. And because what was it, 7 total games, and you think about, was it 8? Yeah. Oh yeah, because we played in the Big Ten championship game, so we played 8 games. But when you look at those games, like the Indiana game, the Rutgers game, we didn't really pull away in the second half, so our guys were playing. Like you think about the 4 linebackers, they really took the majority of the reps that year. You look at some of the guys at different positions. So because of that, we were young. We missed Josh Myers, we missed Wyatt, and there's a lot of guys in there, Luke Farrell, that we just didn't have that had accumulated a ton of reps over the years. The younger guys hadn't got that. So obviously the quarterback was one of them, and so the running backs, JK was gone. So, going in, you're like, okay, we know we have some pretty talented players, but they've never played, and we have to start right out of the gate, with these guys. And so that was concerning, but, we grinded and we worked the preseason. This year it's different because these guys have played more. So at least you have a better idea of who you have. Doesn't mean anything other than the fact that there's more experience and you have a better feel for kind of the team you have, but a new defense and a new scheme there. So.
Not to disparage the old staff, but how good do you feel about this staff and the experience that they're going to have with the players' experience, that this is going to be a much better defense?
Well, I like the scheme. I like what Jim's doing. I like what our defensive staff is doing. I think Tim and Perry and Larry do a great job. I think, they teach effort. They teach fundamentals. I like what's going on there. But the proof will be in the pudding. We play, on September 3rd. But certainly there's a lot of optimism.
Second row left, Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
Just following up on Bill's asking with the offensive line, we sometimes see that at other positions like corner, D-line, where they'll start guys on the outside and moving them in. Is there any benefit to doing that on the offensive line when the guy's younger, starting them outside before maybe you move them around other spots?
I think it just depends on, what gives them the opportunity to get more reps. Last year it made sense to kind of move Paris inside because of the depth. He could have been a backup tackle last year, but we felt like we wanted to get him in a guard, get a year under his belt. That's going to pay off this year. If he was a player who didn't play at all going into the season, we would be a little bit more concerned. Now he played a whole year at guard. He's moving over to tackle. He's got a lot of that experience under his belt. Thayer moved over the year. Some guys had moved around. So the idea is just to get him on the field and get him going, and then we can always adjust from there. And Justin wants to start those guys at tackle to get them as many reps as possible. And so and if it's time to move inside, we'll move them inside when it's right. I want to watch the film. We're getting a lot of reps. Things are moving fast. Pads aren't on yet, so that we'll see. Certainly the numbers are there. We got some guys healthy. Josh is back, and so that's good. And so those guys did have a good summer, but we'll see as we get going.
You still don't have an answer on Lewis. Wow.
No, we don't. No, we're still waiting on that. Yeah.
Right next door, Steve Hellwagon, 24/7 Sports, Buckeyes.
Yeah, Coach. You lose Wilson and Olave there at wide receiver, and a lot of people think after the Rose Bowl it's Harrison and Ekbuka, but I don't know, just how important is it to find consistent playmakers at those two positions and not just anoint somebody at the beginning of camp? They got to go out and prove it every day. Just what are you looking for, and who all do you feel is in that group to maybe fill those roles? Very important roles.
Yeah, and you don't just walk in and think that that's going to happen, like you said. I thought all those guys had a great offseason. Julian Fleming had the best offseason he's had to this point. He was an Iron Buckeye, one of the most improved. That was excellent. Emeka, I think he graded out as a gold, so that was great. Marvin was solid all offseason. So, those guys, Xavier Johnson was in the mix. Cam Babb, same thing. So, those guys, when you look at them, they're strong and they're tough, and we need toughness on the perimeter and guys who are going to make plays, and certainly the technique of route running. And we were really looking for leadership there, and like across the board. You think of wide receivers, you don't think of toughness, but we want toughness all across the board, and so that'll be important with that group, and just grinding to get better every day.
Front row right, Tim May, Lettermen Row, on 3.
I need some more things on this. Ryan, when you look at Matt Jones, and we talked to you about this a little bit in Indianapolis, but Matt Jones and Donovan Jackson there, just as you were watching them today, does that look sort of like that offensive line you want? You understand what I'm saying? Does it look the part? And what do those two guys in particular bring to the table, do you think?
I think they bring strength and leverage and power. So, yeah, it's when you look at the line, ideally, you got a center who's built like a center. You got two, pretty thick guards in there, and then you got pretty good length on the outside. So, yeah, but they do come in all shapes and sizes, So, you still got to play, and that's the idea. But yeah, that's they're built like guards.
And before I ask my second question, let me just add a follow to that. Do you stress to your offensive line coach, you want those guys to see almost every look you can give them, meaning different formations, et cetera, maybe a guy floating behind, and jumping in there like Jim Knowles throws out there. How do y'all approach? Do you want that so there's no big surprise?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think that there's a couple things there. I think first off, on offense, we have to block everything. On defense, they have to stop everything, right? So you have to have that mentality. But if you're doing that every day in practice, you're not working on fundamentals. So I think there's a fine line there. I think sometimes you got to kind of throw the kitchen sink on both sides, but then other times you got to kind of line up and say, okay, it's me against you. Who's got the tighter hands? Who's got the better pad level? Who's tougher? And you got to go play football. So I think there's a balance there, and that balance is important and something that we've talked about as early as this morning. Just trying to figure that part of it out.
And real quick, Jordan Hancock and Kai Stokes, just getting all kinds of rave reviews about those guys during the offseason. Kai Stokes from the obviously the spring game and stuff. I know you haven't watched video yet, but did those guys flash again for today? For example, I mean, do you think you can? Those guys are bringing depth that you need.
I think, we're going to need them to. We're going to need them to play. And I hope that they're ready by the first game because they're both very, very talented and, like you say, flash. But usually when they flash, that means that they're not doing it consistently. So they got to learn to do it consistently. Now, this is just the beginning, so I'm hoping that they're going to take the next step this preseason. Yeah.
But you go into it like, do you tell your coach, I want your mind wide open because there could be a guy coming up instead of being blurred by the guy that's returning. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, you can't label. Yeah, and you can't do that way. And we do actually. We have a couple people in house that for that very reason. We kind of keep them away from it all, and they sit back with Mark Pantoni and just evaluate the film and just give their honest opinion without knowing anybody, without watching anything. Just watch the film and give their evaluation.
Fourth row right, Tony Gertman, Buckeye Huddle.
Ryan, how well do you sleep the night before fall camp opens?
Fall camp, I'm okay. Yeah, fall camp, I'm all right. As we start getting to September 3rd, not as good.
What is it? Where does this rank, I guess, on a head coach's calendar? The first day of fall camp.
It's just the beginning of a long journey. It's the first step in a long, long journey, and there's a lot that comes with that. There's the personal side for the families and for everybody, where you go from being away in June, recruiting, doing different things, and then all of a sudden you're home for a couple weeks, and you're bumping into the family because they're not used to having you in the house, and then all of a sudden you're gone for like 6-7 months. You don't really have a day off, so there's that part of it. Like anything, this job has a lot of extremes. But then there's the football part of it, and that's thinking about where you're going and where this journey is going to take you, and what this team's like, and what it needs, and but that's a fun part. And this time of year is great, preseason. You learn a lot about your team. You kind of hunker down, and the good thing is it's just football for these guys. Finals are done, and we don't start again, I think, till the 23rd. So it's just football for them, and they can focus on that, and a lot can be done over these next couple months. But I guess to answer your question, it's just the first step in a long journey and where it might go.
Where did it rank on your calendar as a player?
I did not like it as a player. No, I remember being in the middle of my freshman year, in the middle of camp, and I felt like I was in the middle of the ocean. And everywhere I looked, I couldn't find any land. All I saw was football. And then one of the older guys put their arm around me and said, "Don't worry about it. We've been there before. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. We're going to get through this thing." And then every year it gets easier because it becomes more normal. But I talk to the freshmen about that all the time because I remember being in their very shoes. And that was when there was two-a-days. We don't have two-a-days anymore, so it's a little different. But still, it's all relative.
Deep left, Brendan Gulick, Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated.
Hey, Coach. Hey, no offense to Minnesota, who obviously is a good program, but it felt like Oregon was the team early in your schedule last year that had legitimate college football playoff aspirations. You've got a team in Notre Dame this year that's a week earlier. Considering what happened with a young team against Oregon last year, I'm just curious what your perception of the locker room is as guys are preparing to play what is clearly the biggest game early in the year for them.
Well, I think that they know they've been in big games, and they know they got scars. They've got stars on their chest, from winning games, but they've also got some callous, and I think that makes it good. They've understand it. There's some experience there. Listen, everyone's going to be juiced up for that game, but it's certainly not going to overwhelm anybody. We've been there before. We've been in the bright lights. We know what that's like, but we know how important it is to go win that game, and certainly on the back of everybody's mind here in camp.
How about on the defensive line individually, Tyleik Williams? Just curious what his offseason looked like and what you want to see from him.
Good. His body changed, and we just need more consistency out of Tyleik. But that's another guy who flashes. He's very, very athletic. We're going to need competitive stamina out of Tyleik. and continue to build the toughness and stop that run game. He can really rush the passer great. So those are all the things that he and Coach Jay are working on. But thought he did a really good offseason in terms of his body. You know, he's cut some weight. He's looking much better, and so hopefully we can in the next week or so see him take the next steps in those areas.
Fifth row right, Spencer Holbrook, on 3, Lettermen Row.
Ryan, kind of piggybacking off that, the defensive tackles, you guys are in an interesting spot because you've got unproven veterans, and you've got young guys who are starting to try to make an impact. Heading into fall camp, just a general sense of talent level, expectations in that defensive tackle. Where is your head at?
Well, I think the whole defensive line unit has great talent, and they have good depth. So now, it's time to have guys step up here in the next couple of weeks and find out who can we count on, when we need them the most. It's one thing to say, well, we got a lot of depth and role guys, but, when we really need someone to play at a high level, who are we going to be able to count on to go make those plays? And we can count on to stop the run and be tough and be accountable. I think we got some really good guys in that room, some really good candidates, some guys who had some excellent summers. So I'm hoping that there's probably 4 or 5 that we can count on in that defensive tackle room, and the same thing at defensive end. But we'll see over the next couple of weeks. We'll see where guys are at.
Switching over, there were 4 or 5 guys standing back there fielding punts. How important is it to have guys other than Jackson that you're confident in can catch ball inside the 10?
Yeah, it's very important. It's one thing to do it in practice. Another thing when you're in a game. And the game's on the line, you got to get a guy, and that's a unique skill set because there's bullets flying right across your, right outside your ears and right in front of you, there's bodies. So you got to be able to catch the ball, and you got to, at least you got to have a couple guys who can fair catch it to be, and do a good job with that. But you also have some guys who got to be able to turn it. Certainly Jackson's done a good job with that. There's a couple other guys that I think we can count on, but we're trying to train at least 4 or 5 so that we have a bullpen.
Back there because he's so talented, but also if something happens, then you don't have him on your offense.
Yeah.
How do you try to balance that, knowing how good he can be there, but also knowing, hey, if he's not on the offense, then the offense.
Yeah, we try to find that balance. Yeah, I mean, certainly we don't want to put him at risk, but at the same time, we got to go win games. We got to go win games. So something we talk about a lot.
Got time for just a few more. Front row right, Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, a couple of guys who were in the Guardian camps that they were in NFL camps. What went into making that available? Is it beneficial?
Well, there's been a lot of research done, and certainly the NFL is doing it. We made it optional for our guys to use that if they felt like it was appropriate for them. We did not make it mandatory. We just we talked to them about some of the things that have been done, asked them to do their own research, and there were a few guys that decided to use them.
And as kickers go, Noah Ruggles being back out there, having not been here in spring, how's he looked this summer? What's just been how's he looked?
Yeah, good. You don't know until you get going, but so far so good.
Fifth row middle, Pat Murphy, Bucknuts, 24/7 Sports.
Ryan, you talked about the stamina, and you talked about your first fall camp as a player. For guys that are going through this for the first time, how do you keep that stamina going just in camp to get them to the season to be ready to go?
Yeah, I think for the guys who just got here this summer, it's even harder than the guys who have been here since January because everything's new. And when everything's new, that kind of takes a toll on you. But I think you just talk them through it. You just try to do the best you can to, we have a Big Brother program where each of those young guys are assigned a Big Brother to be a mentor to help them through those types of things. But even as coaches, just to continue to talk to them and explain to them it's normal what they're going through and try to help them that way.
And you guys moving to the hotel Sunday, again, for especially young guys, but everybody, now that you have a veteran team, what does getting into the hotel, being together for however many weeks do for a team leading into, especially with a game like that to start the season?
Yeah, I mean, it just really avoids distractions. It kind of keeps everybody else away and just allows us 2 weeks of focus where we can just kind of be together and just worry about each other and not have the distractions of everything else and being scattered.
And final question, second row middle, Doug Lamreese, Cleveland.com.
Ryan, I like all the designations you guys have, but I can't keep it all straight sometimes. Iron Buckeye, what does that mean? What's that level?
Yeah. So
if you describe that,
Yeah. So Mick has his champions, and we have gold, red, and blue. Actually, I think some years we've had gray, just when there's been a little bit of distinction there. But gold is what you want. That's the gold standard. Guys who had great summers, didn't miss anything, weren't late, those type of things. And then Iron Buckeye is just a little bit further, where in each skill, big skill, and then in the line recognizes having a most outstanding summers.
how much does that translate, do you think, that you're an Iron Buckeye in the summer? How, over the years, how much has that led to, wow, this guy then got after it in the fall?
Unbelievable. Yeah, when you look at the guys who have been gold and you look at the guys who have had those recognitions, I mean, the carryover on the field has been tremendous and has a lot to do with accountability. Now, it doesn't mean anything, but it gives you a chance because of all the things that we ask you to do on the football field, carry over to what Mick does in the offseason. So it certainly doesn't guarantee you anything, but it gives you one heck of a chance.
And you're talking about getting game ready for Notre Dame and trying to find those guys. If you're game ready, we'll get you out there.
Yep.
Especially with young guys. What is that like? You and the position coaches talking about that, the physical part of it, the mental part of it, the emotional part of it. What's that decision-making process of, is a guy ready or not?
Well, to prove yourself every day that, like you said, the physicality, the execution, understanding what you're doing with your assignments, playing fundamentally sound, but then consistently doing it over time. That, we can count on you to do your job, know what you're doing, and then if we can do that, then you become game ready. And we try to create game situations to see how you're going to respond. But every day in practice is an opportunity to prove yourself.
Just to double check, Cam Babb, his health has always been, how's he doing? How's he doing as camp starts?
Yeah, great. He's 100%.
Coach, thank you very much.
Yep, thanks, guys. Okay.
All right, folks, I'm going to ask everybody to move on out to the Biggs lobby. We've got tables set up there and power cords. Same time tomorrow, we'll have an open window